The interesting part to me when we were actually doing engineers, I tell people combat engineering is about digging ditches and blowing things up, and the blowing things up piece has always been more fun.
Right.
I spent my first part of the career in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Was my first assignment, and we would go to ranges in Korea where they would give us just gobs of demo. And I remember one time, I think I had 6 or 10 40-pound cratering charges. And we go out to the range. The range, of course, is on the side of a mountain, and it's just all rock. There's no way to actually bury these things. So we would just link them together and set off, 400 pounds at a time.
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Jon Strickler, Cullum number 43731. We'll hear about Jon's enjoyment of explosives as a combat engineer and his success in business and in mountain biking. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants, not of West Point, the Army, or any government organization, most particularly the City of Eagle Vail. Jon Strickler, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Now, we've known each other when we were plebes. We kind of knew each other. We ran into each other. And then most recently in the Colorado mountains, we ran into each other. So we bookended both sides
That's right.
of it. So it's a lot to catch up in the middle, but it was a good beginning and a good current present. So off we go.
All right.
Frederick, Maryland, 1981-ish. What did a young Jon Strickler find interesting about West Point?
You know, it's interesting. I actually grew up on a farm in Maryland, and when my parents separated, we moved to Frederick. So Frederick was kind of a second home for me. But a lot of that time in my childhood was, I think, with scouting. I spent a lot of time in the Boy Scouts. I was an Eagle Scout. And, as part of that, we did field trips. Some of those were to the Naval Academy, sort of a military organization. So it kind of piqued my interest. I knew my dad was in the Navy. He was in the Navy during the Korean War. So I had a little bit of interest there. But, it was... part of it was a good school, part of it was a free education, and part of it was an interest, at least a passing interest in the military.
Okay. Now, farming as a part of your childhood experience, was that a kind of long days, some of us who had a little bit of land that we grew up on ended up working our Saturdays versus going out and goofing around. Was a hard working childhood that way, or you did it?
We were the spare labor for my dad. My dad ran the farm a lot on his own. He actually had a full-time job as well. So he ran the farm on the nights and weekends.
Okay.
And I remember we were recruited for tasks like unloading hay wagons. And it was a profitable venture too, I'll tell you, Paul. We made 35 cents a wagon when we were throwing the bales of hay into the elevator to get them into the barn.
It started with the high cash activities early in life. Yeah, I remember.
Exactly.
I remember bales of hay, and it was certainly led me very quickly to say, I'm definitely going to college.
Yeah.
So what were you known for? High school or athlete, academics? What was your forte in high school?
I ran track in high school, track and cross country. I tried to play soccer, but I wasn't coordinated enough. I spent a lot of time on the bench when I was playing soccer. But I think I was kind of a book geek when I was in high school. Ran a lot of cross country. That was probably my main activity: cross country and track. But not.
And then what kind of activities in terms of academics were you a merit scholar and those kinds of things? What was your how did you track on that stuff?
I'm not sure what a merit scholar is, so or how I would have qualified to be one in that day and age.
I did just some standardized test where you had a number 2 pencil. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I did good enough to get into a couple of colleges, West Point being one of them,
well, that's
and
pretty good. I mean, come on now.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I was, as I said, I was a pretty good student.
Yeah,
And we'll leave it at that.
that's fine.
I,
Our day coming into West Point. Now the scouts didn't exactly prepare much for that. But what did you prepare for when you went up?
uh, my mom took me up to West Point on our day, and I have some fuzzy memories of spending the night. I think maybe even in Highland Falls or at the Thayer, and then getting dropped off and having no idea what the hell was going on from that point on.
From that point on, it became a bit of a swirl.
Pretty much, but everybody's yelling at me, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So,
Yeah. Now, as a plebe, you were in D4, and I was in C4. So that's how I remember you as a plebe, because we are in Beast Barracks and all that, because we were marching around each other at the time. But right, you were in D4, right?
I was D4.
And how'd you find that? Because you weren't in the Wild West Battalion, you were one over, which is fine, right? But which is probably good to your benefit. So how was D4?
Uh, it wasn't bad. There was the good and I guess a fair amount of discipline. I think in D4, Go Dukes.
Yeah.
More discipline than I cared for at the time. uh, but I don't know. I had good roommates. I had good. We had a great room. We had a room that was above the sally port that looked out over toward the soup's house.
Yeah.
And it was good. You could kind of see the comings and goings, and look out on the plain and down to the Hudson.
Yeah. Roger Carson's Barry Peterson and I were exactly above you up on the 5th floor.
Oh wow!
That great view, right? You could see the soup's house, and yeah, it was like you could see out into the world in a weird way.
Right.
Versus into, what
Yeah, I think
good
I
memories.
had a better room when I was a plebe than I did any time in G2, because we all looked at the central area, and if you looked at the backside there, you were kind of looking at the mountain that went up to the chapel, the hill. So you never actually saw much.
What memories from plebe year remain other than seeing the soup's house?
Man, it was all kind of a blur, Paul.
Sure.
I think I told you before we started this. You're gonna find that I've repressed a lot of my memories. I think a lot of it was stress related, and some of it was just trying to live a happier life.
Yeah.
Plebe year was probably the highest among those.
Yeah, no kidding. And so transitioning to G2, how did you find that shift over to second reg?
Yeah, I think it was a real welcome shift. We had a great classmates in that class. Yeah, I like the Gators.
Yeah.
Who's our TAC? Christic? Well, we had a couple of TACs come and go, but Christic was the last one that we had. Pretty good TAC. Yeah, I enjoy the Gators, and those are the guys I stay most in touch with. Some of the guys from there, and then some of the guys from some of my early assignments in the Army. So great friendships coming out of that.
For sure. What course of study did you go after when you got over to? We start picking what we focus on.
I was electrical engineering.
Wow, man. And I saw it from your howitzer entry. You were a starman for a portion of that, right?
I think I would have been a starman if I didn't walk so many hours, Paul.
We're gonna get to that.
I think that got me pushed down on the totem pole there.
Yeah. So because your howitzer entry says you were both a starman and a sentryman, so I guess we might as well just rip the Band-Aid off. What was all the hours for?
It was all kind of just dumb stuff. The the I remember one time I got a pretty big slug. I there was a trip going to support, I think, a basketball game at Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I took the bus down to watch the basketball game, and I met up with my brother, and we went out, and I didn't see any basketball. And I just remember I got my ass chewed pretty good when I got back. And it was one of those things where I forget who was in charge of that contingency, and he was so mad. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm going to be a very good officer because I just can't get this upset about things. I don't know how that's going to work.
The worst trouble I ever got in was on a trip section where I did not attend all the events we were supposed to be attending. And I had a major really take me to task on that. So
It might have been the same guy.
Speak.
It might have been the same guy.
Was your brother down there? What was your brother doing down the other end now? Did he just come up from, what was he doing that you were able to see your brother?
Well, my family all lived in Maryland, the Baltimore, D.C. area. So
he had a chance to see you.
Yeah, he skipped down there and might have met some other friends down there as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So you got a good one for that, but you just kind of slow but sure just built up the hour.
I built up, yeah, I think my biggest slug was maybe 20 and 25.
Yeah.
That might have been one of my biggest slugs, the trip section skipping.
Okay. So they just basically built it up that way. So you don't have one big fantastic memoir starting slug. You just kind of built up into it.
I have everything from 8 and 4s to that, and I found a lot of different ways to screw up, Paul.
Right. It's like dollar cost averaging, but different. You build it up until you're a century man.
Exactly.
Good stuff. Electrical engineering. What was that like? First, you were kind of an elite because we were all terrified of electrical engineering.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked it. It's basically applied math, and I always like math, and it was kind of cool to see how math works in the real world, electromagnetic waves, and also there's computer sections of that and those kind of things. So yeah,
So did you find academics got, because there's all different stories on it. Did you find academics got harder or easier toward the end, or what was your experience, particularly in that major?
Yeah, I think for me, I learned how the system worked better, and found the appropriate amount of how much studying was required and those kind of things. So I think my grades, my first semester was probably the biggest shock. Everybody was yelling at me, and I still had to do work.
Yeah.
Luckily, some of the math classes were reviewed for me. I actually came into West Point. I validated out, I tested out of chemistry.
You did,
which actually might have been easier for me because instead I took Russian, and it was both a new. I hadn't taken any language in high school, so learning a foreign language, plus I had to learn a new alphabet.
You might as well start with Russian.
You might as well start with Russian. Yeah, why not?
Right. Little Cyrillic, crazy tenses. The grammar apparently is really hard for non-natives, right? So congratulations for
yeah.
I jumped from chemistry into Russian. Good job.
Yeah, I would have been better off if I had stayed in to shine my shoes that test day as well.
Right.
The Toad Cup, which was an event in the G2 life cycle.
What was the Toad Cup from G2?
The Toad Cup. I remember one day I was the CQ for our company, and I think it was the weekend there was like a Special Olympics on post, but somehow there was a trophy sitting on the CQ desk, this runner trophy. And somebody asked me, like, what is that? And I'm like, I don't know how it got here. And And we're like, well, we should do something for it. I said, well, let's have a race. We'll do one lap around the how our barracks were with the bathrooms in the middle. We'll do one lap around, and whoever gets back to the desk first will win the trophy. So we had, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people, and we all lined up and we went. And as soon as we started I think we were yearlings at the time. And as soon as we started racing, like our first sergeant came out of his room. He's like, "What are you guys doing?" And we just, like, ran past him. He tackled one of the guys. And then further down, somebody else came out and, like, "What's all the commotion?" And by the time we got around, like, there was 2 of us that actually finished the race. And we awarded the trophy and made it a semi-annual event, so that each semi-annual we would have another lap around, and they got more and more just outrageous. Like, people started polishing the floors on the corners and bringing beds out that you had to jump over, and so the Toad Cup was a G2 event that only lasted as long as the class of '86 was there.
That's fantastic. It started as, what is that? I don't know. And the next thing you know, they're creating a complete slalom course as you had to run around. That's funny.
Yeah, I think one of the times we sent at least one person to the clinic after one of the races.
It's all fun until somebody gets sent to the clinic, right?
It was minor sprain.
That's why you were there. Were you part of the marching crew like the rest of us in March and Parades, or did you have a club you were in, or how did you spend your time?
Yeah, a big part of it was on the parachute team.
Right.
I was on the parachute team. We'd jump into the stadium. I remember a couple of field trips. We went down one time to do a jump on the beach in Atlantic City I think it was for the Today Show.
Wow.
I'm not sure I ever made the Today Show. I almost landed in the ocean. There was a good stiff breeze. I think the cameras were on people that had a safer landing than I did at that point.
Right. It would have hurt the morale of America seeing a West Point cadet flopping into the breakers there. What? How did you get interested in that? In skydiving?
I just remember there was a sign-up sheet that came around, and I'm like, this would be a good way to get out of some of the mundane things while we wait around. And I don't know, it always sounded like fun.
Yeah.
So I think they jump on the plane now. At the time I was there, we went out. We would take deuce and a halves out to past Buckner. I think it was a place called Frederick. And we had a little DZ there that the helicopter would come and meet us. So we spent a lot of our afternoons bouncing around in deuce and a halves on dirt roads going back to that landing zone.
Right. And how many jumps did you end up getting as a cadet?
I think I ended with about 380 something.
Wow. And then so in that group, if you can remember, what was like were there some people who had like 500 and others had 200, or did everybody get roughly the same amount?
I think that was pretty typical. Somewhere between 300 and 500 would be over the course of a cadet life.
And as you got more experience at that, did the experience of it change, or was it a thrill every time you did it?
It's always a thrill. I mean, there's different disciplines.
Right.
You would do relative work where you'd match up as you were following with different people, or we had canopy work where it was trying to land as close to a target as you could. Some of the competitions that we went to through that.
Now, other than heading into the surf in Atlantic City, what was your most memorable jump? What was one which stadium, or what was one that stands out?
It was always fun to jump into West Point, carry the game ball in. Those were always fun times.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
What an experience. That's good for you. And then you became an engineer. At what point did you know engineers was for you?
Well, I think engineer was I don't know. I don't remember how we got exposed to engineering at Buckner. Like I remember
Right.
tanks and all that, but I don't remember what the engineers did. Uh, the interesting part to me when we were uh, actually doing engineers, I tell people combat engineering is about digging ditches and blowing things up, and the blowing things up piece has always been more fun.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I spent my first part of the career in Korea.
Hmm.
Was my first assignment, and we would go to ranges in Korea where they would give us just gobs of demo. And I remember one time, I think I had 6 or 10 40-pound cratering charges. And we go out to the range. The range, of course, is on the side of a mountain and it's just all rock. There's no way to actually bury these things. So we would just link them together and set off, I don't know, 400 pounds at a time and just massive explosions.
Right.
I remember when I got back, they decided. So I picked Korea because when I picked it, the engineer school was still in Belvoir, and they said if you go to Korea for a year, we'll send you anywhere you want for your next 3 years before you go to advanced school.
Right.
And while we were in Korea, they moved the engineer school to Leonard Wood and said, we think we're just going to send everybody to Leonard Wood afterwards, then we don't have to do another movement for them.
Right.
But I remember I got back to Leonard Wood. Yeah, good times. I get back to Leonard Wood, and we'd go to demo ranges at Leonard Wood, and you had to call in, and they would do a calculation based on the relative humidity and air pressure and tell you how much you could detonate above ground.
Right.
And on a good day, it was about 12 pounds.
And over in Korea, you were able to have a little bit more.
Quite a bit more. Yeah. I remember one time in Korea, I went to this demo range, and this lieutenant came up to me, and they were working on these old barracks, trying to demo them that
Right.
were like a quarter mile down the road from our demo range. He's like, we got to get rid of all of these cement embankments. Do you think you could help us out with that? I'm like,
No problem.
yeah, why not? There wasn't much oversight on those demo ranges there.
You were at that point. You didn't start calculating humidity. You just said, okay,
Right.
bring the deuce and a half up. Let's go.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. What was some memorable things about Korea? I mean, that's a very intense experience over there, right?
Yeah, I mean, Korea at the time, I was just looking the other day. We have a much smaller presence in Korea than we did even back then. I was with Second Engineers over there, which was we were a little bit up the road from Camp Casey, which was the main Second Army headquarters, and but I mean, we were still. I think our troops still stayed in those half round Quonset huts. We had barely a barracks for our BOQ.
Right.
My BOQ room was smaller than this office. You could barely get a bed and a desk in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
And then but we still had good a lot of good field time, a lot of chances to get out and do exercises with the Korean nationals. We had Korean nationals even in my platoon assigned to our company.
So when you chose Korea, was it simply for the option of the next assignment, or what was kind of in your thinking about choosing Korea, and what was your perspective on an Army? Were you thinking a short time in and out, or where was your head on that when you chose the Korea assignment?
Oh, I don't think I had that great of a thoughts on it. A lot of it was, Carson and Lewis had already gone out by the time that they got to my number. So, I figured if I go to Korea, there's still an opportunity to get those. Korea is, it was a good assignment too. I can't say it wasn't.
Those of you who went to Korea always seem to have more of a plan than the rest of us. This is
I
my
don't know about
perception.
that.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm going to Korea in order to, and the rest of us was like, let me see what I can get.
Yeah. Go to Korea as a hardship assignment to get something better next time.
Right. That was kind of the thing, right? So if you're an infantry guy, I wanted to go to the Ranger Battalion or whatever. And so they trundled you back to Leonard Wood, which was the fantastic option you got for your year in Korea. What did you get an assignment there, or was it just how did that work?
I had two kind of assignments there. I spent the first part in basic training. The 21 Bravos all went through Leonard Wood for their training. 21 Echoes, combat engineers.
Yeah.
So it was running a basic training battalion or base training company. I started out as an XO there, putting together training plans, and then I moved to the S3 for a little bit, and then why do I forget this? There was also an engineer battalion there.
Yeah.
And I worked as the XO at one of the battalions before I got out as well.
Yeah.
We spent some time in the National Training Center and
okay, you did all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then what was the atmosphere? Because you got out in 90. Did I read that right in your LinkedIn?
I did. Yeah, I got out a year early when they were doing the drawdown during the Reagan years.
I hear that a lot from engineers. What was the atmosphere there? Just they were encouraging everybody to leave, right?
It was kind of, I think the choice was, get out now or go to advanced course, and then we're going to expect you to probably stay in for at least one more kind of tour before you should expect to get out. So, it was kind of either get out now or you'll go to the advanced course and probably spend another couple of years.
Next assignment. So you just say, you got out. Were you single when you got out? How did your family situation develop?
Oh yeah, I was single at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. When I got out, I what did I do? I think I went back and I was in Maryland for a while, back with my family. And then the first job I got out of the military was with Anderson.
Yeah.
What's now Accenture, Anderson Consulting.
That's kind of a big move. Going to Anderson right out of the Army, now Accenture, it's called. But how did you get that gig?
Through a recruiter that specialized in placing Army officers.
Okay.
I remember big recruiting seminars down in Dallas, and you did like 10 interviews a day, and out of that I got a few job offers out of that, and then.
Now, when did your MBA come? Was your MBA later, or because you got it in Missouri, right?
Yeah, I got my MBA while I was at Leonard Wood.
Okay.
There was a college right up the road that actually ran some classes at Leonard Wood, and then you'd go to Leonard Wood or to Rolla. It was Rolla, Missouri. What's now, it was a School of Mines, and it was called Rolla, and now I think it's called the School of Science and Technology. But that was an engineering management. So, and that was actually part of my deal. Is I think when I got that, they, I signed up for 3 more years. And they said, well, if you get out now on this deal, we'll forgive that as well.
Oh, okay. Well, that certainly is an incentive.
Yeah.
So that also having an MBA, I'm sure, helped with the Accenture placement or the Anderson time placement.
I think it did.
Yeah. What was your first role there?
I was a programmer. I got hired in Denver. Moved to Denver, and then they immediately sent me to Dallas to work on a project with the Veterans Administration. And
really,
that was just it was actually the supply depots that supplied the Veterans Administration hospitals, and it was putting in a software to manage their inventory management. Not very exciting stuff, Paul, but a lot of great people. Just great people that I met, not people that I'm still in touch with today.
Right. Well, you said programmer. Did you install software and kind of make sure it worked, or were you actually doing coding?
Actually coding. Yeah, really? I started out coding, and then
you just don't code from scratch, brother. How did that come about? So they just say,
What?
you look like a guy. You start coding. You had to have worked on that a little bit, right? How'd you get to be a coder?
No, I hadn't coded since I was at West Point in Fortran in the Fortran labs at West Point.
No kidding.
Yeah, no,
Those were exciting times. You could just come in off the street and just start coding.
exactly.
That's great.
Yeah, they had a training program at Anderson that they would send you to. It was actually like going back to college a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was a month or a month and a half even that gave you the very basics of the programming language that we used anyway there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of on the job training.
So after being a lieutenant, up through captain, leading people, blowing stuff up, how did you find coding? I mean, what was that shift like in terms of the work?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I guess I expected that that's just what the civilian work was like. It and it kind of fit my, at least academic training at West Point. I think I had 2 or 3 programming courses at West Point. Computer science is kind of adjunct to electrical engineering. So,
Sure.
Yeah, so I felt pretty well prepared for that, I guess.
Great. I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you though, it's not something I wanted to do long term. Talking to a computer and getting it to do what you expect it to do. You think you told it the right thing, and it never does it the first time.
Right.
And just long days at a computer were not really my thing. So I think I was with Anderson Consulting for a couple years, and then a couple of the people I'd worked with went to work for a more operations oriented consulting company, which was really more my thing. It was Lean Six Sigma.
Yeah.
How do you get 10-ton presses to make angle iron in a way that produces a seat was a little bit more exciting anyway.
Sure. But then did you move to the engagement side where you're working with people? I mean, where you were kind of interacting with the client and all that?
With the operations company, it was called George Group.
Uh-huh.
With that operations company, we did a lot more of that for sure. And as part of that, we started also doing more of I moved in kind of a sales role, which was not just how do you put the practices in place, but in the sales role, helping the people that are buying those services understand what kind of impact it might have and
right.
how it would overall impact their value and, return on their capital investments, those kind of analysis in order to sell the services and help them understand why they wanted to make those changes.
And so contrast the kind of value finding in sales in that world where you're dealing with people and helping them understand value versus some of the more head down stuff. How was that shift? Did you enjoy that work more?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as I said, the thing that I always liked about when I worked with Accenture was that the people, we had just great people. I worked with a Naval Academy grad who was our senior manager on that project, and he's just an awesome person. As I said, I'm still in touch with a bunch of those people today. Yeah, but the work itself was a little bit mundane. I mean, and I found the chance to work closer with operations, work closer with the people that are making kind of decisions, and a lot more impact also on bringing value to companies and helping them get better returns, both from their capital investments and from the operations that they ran, the people that were working with them. that's kind of been my thing moving forward is how do you work with companies in a way that brings value? How do you put in place the right practices to bring that value to companies?
Sure, that's what you do. What so your banner headline on your public facing stuff is that you co-founded and built a company. Were you the COO? Talk a little bit about how that came to be and what was going on with that.
Yeah, there's been a couple of companies that I've been involved in that with startups. Some of them have been successful. Some of them have.
We try to only talk about the successful ones, John.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd be here all day.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll talk about a couple of those, but. So I've worked with a couple. The first couple of companies I worked with in startups were technology companies. Mm-hmm. So it was how do you build software to solve business problems. So a couple of those. One medium success, one pretty good success. Took a long time, but I think I talked to you about this before when we were in our reunion. The company that I had the most success was a cannabis company here in Denver, and it was a company that was not focused on how do you build the strongest joint or those kind of things, but it was what are the medical implications of the different compounds that are in cannabis, and how do you bring those to bear in a way that has different impacts on people. Either different feelings or actually therapeutic outcomes from the different compounds that are in them.
Right.
So there were two parts to that. One was actually building those compounds and growing plants that could produce the different expressions of cannabinoids in the plant. And then we had a scientist we worked with that would test different combinations of cannabinoids and terpenes to see how they bound with different receptors and which ones had stronger bindings and weaker bindings to get different effects that cannabis is capable of producing. And, some of those are therapeutic around inflammation or pain. And, some of those are purely more psychological impacts around just feeling good. And
so what did you actually, you sold the compounds was what the company did?
We were mostly purchased for the science that we had, both around how do you create the compounds, grow them in the plants, and then what different combinations of those compounds have the different effects.
Oh, that's interesting.
That
so
knowledge base.
Knowledge that they'd gained, that you'd gained in creating that was what ended up being the value. Huh.
Yeah. And a lot of it was just good timing, actually. I mean, if I'm going to be honest with you, it was at a time when valuations for those companies were very good.
Timing is everything, brother. That's right. Good for you. And that was that's been in the last 5 years, right? Because we were chatting about that in Dallas.
Well, that company sold probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I'd been involved in it for 4 years or so before that.
Okay.
I think the company we were talking about was one that I was involved in after that company.
Yeah,
and we'll put that on the not so successful list at this point.
That's why. So we'll talk about family a little bit. How did you? I know your the adventures of your son's sports exploits on Facebook are always bring me a lot of joy. I met your wife up there in the mountains. Talk about your family a little bit.
Yeah, so I met my wife when I was still at I think I just maybe started with the George Group. My roommate in Denver was also with Accenture, Anderson, and she was working on a project with him and came to Denver to visit, and that's when we met, and dated for a number of years, got married, 2 kids. Fast forward, they're now, my daughter's 20 and junior in college, and my son is 18 and just graduated from. They have a a high school here that's a magnet school focused on skiing. So it's called the Vail Ski and Snowboard Academy.
And for the
Just
kids at
graduated
home,
from
you
there.
live in Eagle Vail, which is up between Breckenridge and Vail, and you live up in that area in the beautiful Colorado mountains where all the skiing happens. Just so we can understand why there would be a magnet for skiing, because you are in the center of mass of where skiing occurs in the U.S. Anyway.
It was nice, Paul, having a son that was interested in skiing. I nurtured that, and eventually it gave us a good excuse to move out of Denver and up to the mountains near Vail. When he started middle school, we moved up here so he could go to a full-time
that's so
ski
his
program.
interest took you up there. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it gave us it gave me a good excuse to join him up here.
Well,
he graduated.
Can't possibly have a podcast without talking about your mountain biking, because I think I've seen more pictures of you mountain biking than I've seen pictures of anybody doing a single activity. So talk a little about all the stuff you do. You do adventure racing.
Well, let me finish up on my son, and then we'll go into that. He's probably more interesting at this point. So he graduated high school last year.
Yep.
And he wants to ski in college, and it's a hard transition to make going from high school straight into college for a lot of different reasons that probably aren't that interesting for this subject. But he's taking a gap year now and is continuing to ski with his ski club. Just got back from Argentina. He spent a month and a half down in South America skiing, getting ready to go to Europe to ski indoors with his team, traveling the world. It would be cheaper to send him to college, Paul, and I'll just leave it at that.
I wasn't going to say anything, but sounds like he's having a good time.
He's having a good time.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, but you asked about the biking.
Yeah.
And but biking, I mean, it's been another reason for me to move up here. I love the skiing. I love the biking. It's something I picked up, I think, kind of late in life, but just found it fascinating going down mountains on bicycles for whatever reason. I think it's, maybe a substitute for skydiving for me in terms of getting that adrenaline rush.
Sure. Makes sense. I understand.
I've gotten a lot more injuries though with mountain biking than skydiving. But no, it's been a good experience. I've done some competitive mountain biking as well. I have won a couple of national championships for mountain biking. Mountain biking for old guys though, Paul. Not the the stuff you see on TV.
Masters level, we call it, right?
Right. Yeah. I've gotten a little less involved in it. When I turned 55, they took us off of the pro lines for competitive racing and put us on the geriatric course. And it requires a lot more pedaling and isn't quite as fun. So I've been a little less involved over the last couple of years.
Yeah. But I mean, you competed at a high level as a master, so that's pretty amazing. Yeah, and I still do a little bit of enduro mountain biking races as well. Good for you. So you keep in good shape doing that. That keeps you going.
I do a lot of biking in the summertime and a lot of skiing in the winter. Try and keep in shape in between those as well.
That's great. So it's your life is organized around a lot of great activities, generally, because you live in an environment where that you have access to that. What else do you do to round it out? What do you and your wife like to do? Do you travel much, or I mean, you live in a beautiful area, so you don't go places to see mountains. I mean, you live there.
But no, we do quite a bit of traveling. My wife just got back from Austria, actually. She was over there hiking. I don't know if you saw on the news all the rains they had. She basically got over there and it started raining. It rained and snowed for 5 days. Some of the hikes they had planned for her to do had 6 feet of snow on them.
Oh,
in September. Yeah, it was really just an odd event. But we do like to travel, travel to see friends, celebrate my 60th birthday, and somewhat like you, I've made a commitment to get out and do more things with people.
It's a good way to spend it. It's a good way to spend
Yeah.
it. And then what is
I
your
agree.
daughter studying? We didn't really talk about her as much. What is she studying?
My daughter?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a dancer. So my son's a skier, my daughter's a dancer. Neither of them will probably ever make any money doing either of those. So, but she goes to Butler University in Indianapolis, studying fine arts, ballet, and it's one of the top ballet schools in the nation, and she loves it there. That's her people. She's studying ballet and the classics, Paul. So both of those are very marketable and pay well in first jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
My son's an engineer.
Well, good for him.
No art in our house. So he and I don't talk about anything aesthetically pleasing, but he's an engineer. So you either go one or the other. So
there you go.
Looking back, you have a really unique path. I really enjoy I enjoy listening to your stories. What advice would you give yourself if you were to go back at any time in your life? So all the way back to that young engineer, or even corporately, what advice would you give yourself at some period in your past?
Yeah, I had such great connections as I was growing up, and I think I didn't give those as much nurturing as they deserved. As I moved through life, sometimes I was looking more at what's in front of me than paying attention to some of the other relationships and friendships that I should have nurtured better. And I'm hoping there's still time to do some of those things, but I think those relationships both could have helped as I was working in my career, and would have just made life more fulfilling as I was going through those things. So that's the advice I would give to a lot of people: is building those relationships, building that connection is an important part of your identity and your health.
Great advice, good thinking, great advice, and certainly something we can listen to as we go forward. So for our health, we can stay connected. So as part of this project is reconnecting. So Jon Strickler, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure reconnected and hearing your stories.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you as well, Paul.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.